In a lot of churches, sharing your faith, well, that's seen as a job for the pros, right? The experts. But what if that's not the case at all? What if it's actually a command for everyone? We're going to dive into a sermon today that argues exactly that. So let's get right into it. All right, so first things first, let's tackle this common idea head on. Is this whole evangelism thing really just for a select few? The specialists? Or is it a responsibility that falls on everyone's shoulders? I mean, really think about it. When you hear that word evangelism, what pops into your head? For a lot of people, it's something really specific, really organized. And the argument we're digging into today is that in so many churches, this super important job it gets walled off. It's treated like it's only for a small, dedicated team. And get this, these specialized evangelism units can be a tiny fraction of the whole church. We're talking sometimes as small as just 2%. And what happens then? Well, you create this dynamic where pretty much everyone else, that other 98%, just sees it as somebody else's job, not something they have to do themselves. But here's the big counterargument. The speaker's point is that you just can't separate a holy life from the act of sharing your faith. They're presented as totally intertwined. It's like one is just incomplete without the other. You can't have one without the other. Okay, so where does this whole idea of a universal command even come from? Well, the argument is that you can trace it all the way back, and I mean all the way back, to the very first book of the Bible, Genesis, way before the New Testament was even a thing. So the sermon points to this one phrase that just keeps popping up over and over again, given by God to different people across generations. Be fruitful and multiply. It's there with Adam, then with Noah after the flood, then to Abraham, and even on to Jacob. It's this recurring command at these huge, pivotal moments. And this is the crucial part, the reinterpretation. The argument is that this command isn't just about having kids, biological reproduction. It's actually using a natural idea to teach a spiritual one. In this view, being fruitful is really a metaphor for making disciples, for spiritually multiplying the community of believers. All right, so if the goal is to be fruitful by making disciples, then what's the message you're supposed to share? This is where we get to the core theological idea, the message that every single believer is apparently entrusted with. The central message is all about reconciliation. This idea comes straight from the writings of the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians. It's the good news that believers are supposed to deliver. But what does reconciliation actually mean in this context? Well, it's described as this perfect exchange. Think of it like a divine accounting transaction. All of our sins, our trespasses, are put on Christ's account, and in return, his perfect righteousness gets credited to our account. It's presented as this clean, complete, total transfer. So how does this message get delivered? It's through what's called the word of reconciliation. And that's key because it means it's verbal. It's a conversation. It's something you say. It has to be spoken out loud and communicated with words. It's not something you can just show through your actions alone. And that brings us to the really practical part. What is the believer's role in all of this? The idea here is that it's not some kind of covert, secret mission. It's a very public, official appointment. The sermon uses this really powerful analogy to explain it. A believer isn't supposed to be a secret agent, hiding in the shadows and working undercover. Nope. They're an ambassador, someone who is open, known, and official representative of another kingdom. Your identity isn't something to hide. It's literally the foundation of your job. And to make this super practical, the speaker tells this little story. He saw some guys playing football on a basketball court, and he just walked up and said something like, "Hey, I thought you guys were playing basketball." Just that simple, kind of funny observation was enough to start a conversation. See? It wasn't some big, aggressive confrontation. It was just a natural, easy opening. And that little story is a perfect example of the method being proposed here. This model isn't about trying to force a belief on anybody. It's all about just starting a normal conversation, building a natural connection, and then, as part of the dialogue, you bring up faith. The goal is just to encourage the other person to check it out for themselves, to investigate the claims. Okay, finally, let's talk about how this perspective just completely flips the script on roles inside a church. Because from this point of view, that line we often draw between the clergy and, everyone else, well, when it comes to this specific ministry, that line basically vanishes. Here's the really crucial point. The call to be a minister isn't some special event that happens years down the road. No. In this view, the very moment a person is reconciled and becomes a believer, they are instantly given this ministry of reconciliation. It just comes with the territory. It's part of the package deal. And to back this up, the sermon points to an example from the book of Acts. You have these guys who were chosen for a super practical job, serving food to widows. But they didn't just stop there. Two of them, Stephen and Philip, went on to become these incredibly powerful preachers. It just goes to show that practical service and speaking about your faith aren't separate walled-off jobs. So let's just do a quick recap of this whole framework. First, evangelism isn't a specialized job. It's a universal command. Second, the core message is that great exchange of reconciliation. Third, the method is this open, conversational ambassadorship, and that all leads to the final point: every single believer is considered a minister of this message. And all of this leaves us with one last big question to chew on. If every single member of a faith is supposed to be a public official ambassador, what does that do to our modern idea of faith being a purely private thing? It's a really fascinating question, and it gets right to the heart of this whole perspective. Thanks so much for tuning in.